Hello, everyone, and welcome to our episode. We are diverse. I am one of your co-hosts, Elcida Dean.
And I am your co-host, Eric Green.
Yes, and today we're going to be talking about something that's not just near and dear to my heart, but every single person that's up here today, and that is diversity, equity, and inclusion.
I mean, I feel like the world is changing so much. In these last couple of years, people have been demanding that there be more diversity in corporations and businesses. I mean, don't y'all agree?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I've also noticed that every single person here today has something beautiful and rich to add to the conversation, which is why we've asked each of you to be here today. So if you would please, first of all, let's welcome. Thanks for being here.
Yes.
And could you please just share a little bit, like, what's your name and how does D&I play a role in what you do today?
Oh, that's a great question. I guess I can start us off. Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone. My name is Kevin Huang, and I'm currently a career coach / career development specialist at UNT. And DEI has played a big role in my life because it's kind of how I was raised. I was raised in an environment of the Midwest. And going into that and learning about myself was difficult, so it's always been a kind of a challenge for me, an obstacle to really identify and understand myself. So it's been different, but it still continues on today, and having my passions be within DEI and trying to provide a more inclusive space for folks has been a really important thing for me. Yeah.
I've got to follow up that. That was so good.
Right.
I'm Alexis Phelps. I am a talent acquisition manager, so DEI is very important to what I do. My team and I essentially are responsible for making sure that we are recruiting diverse candidates to make sure that the future leaders of our company are diverse, right? Like if we only bring in a certain type of candidate, that's who's going to get the position. And then also it's really important to our company right now, and I think just everyone in the workforce to make sure that they're seen, they're heard, but the cool thing that I get to do as a talent acquisition manager and working with universities is I just get to learn a lot, and I think that's what the last couple of years has really given people the stage to do. So, yeah.
I'll go next. My name is Kevin Sanders. I serve as Director of Project-Based Learning here at UNT, primarily with our Frisco students. And DEI plays a huge role in my life in a number of different ways. First and foremost, my job on a daily basis, I work with students. So I teach about 9 hours a week in the classroom. So I get to work with students from all different types of backgrounds. And it's so important to know kind of what makes them who they are, right? It's a big deal. In my personal life, if you didn't know, I'm Black.
Throw it out there.
So, surprise. But being a Black man, you are dealing with DEI on a daily basis, whether you like to or not. So for me, I've always said that I want to be able to take my identity and be able to share with other people to give them a better understanding of people who look like me, while at the same time also being able to understand other people and building my own toolbox as it relates to DEI. So,
Man, I love that. Just to kind of just reflect or show how this connection happened was, Kevin, when we had our session with the Summer Emerging, and you stood up and you said a statement that advocated for Black students, Black and brown students. I was like, that dude, he got something, special about him. Alexis, on the panel, I mean, just our relationship, when you came to SOH and you showed up as an ally and said, what can I do to serve? I was like, man, it's something about that lady. And then Kev, man, just sitting down with you and just processing the language that goes, because I'm a rookie in it. So I'm trying to understand intersectionality, the language that goes with it, and you just helping me to conceptualize it and make meaning of it. And that leads to the first question, like, what does DEI means to you and why is it important? I know y'all kind of alluded to it in your introduction, but can y'all expound on it a little bit better?
Yeah, I'll start. I mean, it's hard to really go through life and say you enjoy people and you enjoy working with people and getting to know people without having an interest in DEI in some way. There are a lot of people who have an interest in DEI, just don't know it, right? I think that DEI in general represents the beauty of what makes us who we are. Everybody has a different story. There's no things that are alike, right? And for me, it's having that opportunity to learn. I'm a lifelong learner. Like that's how I energize. Like in my personal time, I like to learn new things. I like to know different things about different people. So for me, when you talk about DEI, oftentimes people look at that and they're like, man, it's heavy. DEI is this thing that, you know, it's gonna convict me and it's things I don't know about it. For me, I treat it as an opportunity to just learn about different people, right? It's no different than when you date somebody. You wanna know everything about them. You wanna spend time with them. You wanna let them know about you. DEI is no different, right? You need to spend time with people. You need to let them know the things that make you who you are. And you need to be willing and able to learn about them, and that should be a fun process.
I think for me, it's layered, right? Like, I think the inclusive part has always been there. I was a first generation college student. I didn't come from a family that was very well off, but I grew up in a very small town where the majority of the people, you know, I thought I was living a normal life. I'm involved, I'm in sports, I'm cheering, I'm in every organization. And so the people that I surrounded myself with had a lot of more privilege than I even had at the time, but I never really saw myself as different, but I knew I was different in a different kind of way than them, right? Like, it was a known thing of like, oh, well, we're going to do this, but like, we know you can't make it, you know? And so I feel like I was being othered without feeling that way, but I also grew up in a city where 3,000 people, I think I had one black student in my entire ISD. It's very heavily like white population. And so the inclusive piece, I always wanted to give back. That's always was there because I think I needed it growing up more than I didn't even know. My sister was autistic, so like all these things just kind of led into this. And then when I went to college for the first time, because I got a scholarship for being a first-gen student, I had to sit in a space where I was the only white woman, white person at all in a room of 300 people, and had to really sit there and listen to what they were going through, right? Like, sometimes I'm scared to walk home on campus at night. You know, just things like that where I'm like, what? Like, Texas A&M is the safest like, whoa, no way. So it really forced me to open my eyes, and then just moving through different situations I was in college is where the diversity of thought, the diversity piece, but really it wasn't until the last few years and being in the workforce that I realized that the E, like the equity and the importance of diversity. And I think it forced us to really think and learn. And so I just feel like it's something that's always been important, but just the lack of education about subject or exposure until it happened for me is when it kind of all was just, it was so mind-blowing how important it was that it's just became a passion of like, because I know now the other side of living in a world of just privilege and lack of even, it's just something you see on the news, right? Like, it's not even real. And so there's that compassion there, but also the understanding of importance of like, we've got to get this figured out.
For me, I feel like diversity, equity, and inclusion has always been some part of my life. It's been something I've always thought of ever since I was a kid. You know, I was in a predominantly, you know, lower class black neighborhood. When I grew up, my family came from China as immigrants, and then they started working in the restaurant business. So it was very low income, and trying to understand different people and seeing that I was already very different than everyone because there weren't many Asian students surrounding me. And even going into a predominantly white middle school later on in life, learning about that difference was really different. It was really impactful as well, because even then I saw that I was othered again. And then having engaged with a lot of, let's say, well, I was engaged with a lot of like bullying. People bullied me as a kid for being Asian. They used a lot of stereotypes. They used a lot of slurs. So that really impacted how I grew up as an Asian American in the country here. I'm from Ohio, and in the Midwest, there's just not too many opportunities for us to really find our culture or find folks that are in our community until really later on in life. And that wasn't until college when I found that. I literally found an opportunity to reach out to different organizations or student organizations, different community members, and they welcomed me in because I looked like them. I looked and had the same experiences as them. And so I found a lot of love and support from that. And I found opportunities that I don't think I would have found if I just kind of stayed in those specific areas because I didn't have community. And that led me to figuring out ways that I can invest myself in helping others reach that same space, help other college students find that opportunity to build community, to build love and build support within that, and help them grow through the pain and the challenges of being in a country that is not, I guess, representative of them. And not even representative at the college level in terms of faculty, administrators, and et cetera, but at least in the community we have people. And that's been a goal of mine for a while. And I've worked with Asian American students throughout the years, and it's just really fulfilling for me to be able to be in that space and be that mentor or guidance where I had that in the past. I want to be that person to keep that legacy going forward.
Yeah. Just, man, y'all see why y'all see. You see, so I'm already excited about this conversation. But I do want to dig a little bit deeper, the diversity, equity, and inclusion. It was a situation that I had playing basketball one time, and it was a guy, obviously, he had a disability, and it was 5-on-5 at the time, and we was hooping, and we ended up losing the game, and they was like, oh, let's run another one back, but obviously the guy wanted to play. So I knew at that time, it was like, I don't feel right. At first I was gonna start, but for some reason, I just didn't feel right. So one time, when we was about to start, I was like, you know what? He wanna play, I'll give up my spot for him, so he can play. I was like, man, come on, man. I just say, I can't play because I don't feel right. So that's my inclusion story, where I included an individual that obviously, because they were looking for competition. Obviously, he had an ailment, but he wanted to play, but I wanted to include him. So out of the DEI, what specific story do y'all have that kind of give you that introduction? Because that was my introduction. I just didn't have the language to explain it in my heart. I knew it was a heart thing, but I just didn't have the language. But what was your early in the past introduction to either recognizing differences, equity, or inclusion story?
For me, I was blessed to have a sister that was born with a disability, and I think and so I don't know, it just was such a part of my life, and it was so obvious to me, like 10 minutes of you sacrificing playing a sport or letting her in to play like the last quarter of the basketball game for one game. That's something she will talk about for the rest of her life, right? Like homecoming queen, right? Like giving her homecoming queen, that's a moment for you. This is like, she will be wearing that crown for years. So I think like seeing that inclusive piece was there. For me, my biggest moment coming from, I always felt like I wasn't sheltered just from my experience, but it was very sheltered life in my small town. I was a counselor at Texas A&M for our extended orientation program that we have, and A&M does something really cool with their program where it's extended, that's kind of silver, but you have a community of counselors that come together, 24 counselors, and you cultivate relationships with each other for like 9 months on a very deep level. And then you get 150 freshmen at camp for 4 days, and then you go on and you have breakfast with them or lunch or dinner twice a week. It's required. You do library studies so that they always have a place to go. But in picking your counselors, you're picking a diverse group of counselors. And for me, that was the first person I was ever forced to meet someone that's, hey, I'm going through the process of becoming transgender, or hi, I'm atheist, or hey, have this experience, or I'm a person of color. Like being able to meet them as real people and then see all the things they went through, or like I had an abortion, or like I come from this background. It makes everything so much more real. And that for me was just a moment of like, oh, it's not just this person that did this thing. That just seems like an object. But these are real people that have real life experiences, and it just blew my world up at like 19. I was like, this is so crazy. And just being able to hear their story, that's where like that equity, diversity, that's where I was just like, we have to open our eyes to this. So that was, for me, probably the biggest moment of like, these are my friends. These aren't just people I see on TV. Like, these people are my people, you know?
I can go. Yeah, sure. Why not? I'm ready.
Hey, you got something?
I'm ready for you all. Well, I don't want to sound so negative all the time, but I think a big impact of how I realized that I was different was when people did stereotypes to me. A common one, I think, for Asians is when they pull like their eyes back, and that was very prevalent during my like middle school years. And that was, children can be pretty harsh. So when they group up and do that, that was definitely when I realized like, hey, I don't belong here. Hey, they don't really care for me, and they're looking to hurt me in some way. So I think that's when I realized like, hey, I need to fend for myself in some way and try to protect myself because I don't feel safe. And in my method of doing that was joining like a sport, being a part of a track team in high school, and trying to be more involved in different capacities working out, right? Just to protect myself and to be recognized as someone other than just being Asian. And at least I have a sport, right? Or something, right? Because athletes, I feel like during that time, they're recognized for their respective sport because they're trying to work hard on it, trying to master it. And I just wanted to kind of be in that loop so that I wasn't targeted. So I think that was a big realization for me during the middle school years that, hey, you're different, and we don't like that sometimes. So, yeah, sorry about that.
No.
It's like survival. Yeah.
Right.
Profound. I'm gonna speak about equity and inclusion, if that's okay.
Yeah.
And I want to talk from a micro and a macro level. So when I think about equity and inclusion in general, for me, that's taking my own privileges and repurposing those privileges to include people and to provide equity in ways that I have power, right? So one of the ways that I want to talk about that from a micro standpoint first and foremost is in terms of inclusion in my own personal life. I like to hug people. Like, I am a hugger. If you offer me a hug, I will gladly take it back. I'll take it, right? Of course, consent matters, but I am a hugger. So in that, oftentimes what can happen is your uncomfortability with things will show oftentimes in your physical interaction and your physical touch sometimes, right? So for me, because I am a hugger and because I identify as cisgender, right? I have all the power in terms of people wanting to interact with me and wanting to provide physical touch to me and do all these things for me. So for me, whether it's a friend, whether it's spaces I'm in, if I walk into a group and I'm willing to offer a hug or any type of physical contact to anybody in that space, I literally offer that to anybody in that space. For me, that is a way to tear down transphobia and homophobia and all these different things by saying, no, you're a person. I enjoy hug me. Like, it's okay. There's no awkwardness to that. You don't have to feel like you can't or I'm gonna feel uncomfortable by it because you're not attracted to me, right, in that way. So that's the way in which I do inclusion on a micro level. From a macro level, one of the things, I'm an extrovert, a big extrovert, in case y'all haven't picked that up yet. I'm sitting in the middle of this group. I am an extrovert, right? I like people, right? I'm just looking all over, like, I like people. So one of the things that I've tried to do with my students in my class I teach is to provide introverts with the same level of access and ability to shine as an extrovert would have. So an example of this, we just went to a conference a few weeks ago, and we took some students with us to speak on a panel. And I had a couple of extroverts in there and a couple of introverts in there. And one of the things that was important to me was, well, the extroverts are gonna feel comfortable in this space. This is where they are, lights are on, people are there, they're gonna shine, right? How do we give the introverts an opportunity to do the same thing, right? That's creating equity. So we really set out to practice what they were gonna be doing. We gave them the opportunity to do a dry run in front of people to get comfortable doing it. We gave them the questions beforehand so they wouldn't have to feel like they were on the spot. the extroverts might not have needed that, and that's okay because that was already going to be their setting anyway. But to give the introverts what they needed to be able to have equitable access to success like the extroverts would have was so very important. So for me, that's how I do both those things, both from a micro and macro.
Yes. As an
That's
introvert,
awesome.
I appreciate that.
I got you.
Yes, and I loved, like, to me, the common theme between what every single one of you has said is something about otherness. So whether you were the othered because you were bullied, you were in a place where you didn't look like the other people, or whether it was like pulling the curtain back and saying, oh my gosh, people have a completely different experience on the other side of this curtain that I don't have. Right, and I feel like the reason why DEI is so important is because it's transforming someone's experience of otherness and transforming it to being seen for who you are, not because of your differences, but because of your distinctiveness, right? Like who you are as a person, right? And so like I love that you're talking about leveraging like the power that you have and who you are as a person to be able to advocate for someone else who is othered, right? And that takes empathy, that takes vulnerability to listen to somebody else's perspective and then vulnerably put yourself in their shoes to say, what would it be like to be the person on the other side of the basketball court that may not be invited to play in the basketball game, right? So like being able to do that is a talent. And so that's why we want to ask you, like, how do you, from your vulnerable, empathetic state of your experiences that you guys have had, what's your commitment to making sure you push the needle forward when it comes to DEI?
For me, uncomfortability is temporary, right? If I have to be uncomfortable in my privilege and in my power for a little bit of time to make sure that somebody has access to be able to be comfortable in their space and to be able to feel included and to be able to feel involved, then that's a trade-off I'm willing to do, 10 times out of 10. That costs nothing. When you think about really all the things we're talking about today, whether it be making sure somebody's included or even maximizing the diversity of a space or diversity of thought, all those things cost nothing, right? We oftentimes look at things and we have this limited good mentality as though if I give something to someone, that means I lose something for myself, when oftentimes it's the exact opposite. Some of the best things that I've learned, some of the best ways that I've grown has been through my vulnerability and taking a step back to say, how can I put somebody else either in position to be powerful, or how can I leverage my privilege and my power to be able to help somebody else move along. That uncomfortability is where you grow, right? I tell my students all the time, you have to get out of your comfort zone. And comfortability is literally your comfort zone. You'll always be able to survive in your comfort zone, but you're never gonna thrive, right? You have to step out of that space and do something that's hard. And also understanding that sometimes the people that you interact with, that's the reality of their life on a daily basis, right? That small smidge of uncomfortability that you're feeling, you get the choice as to whether or not you accept that or don't. There are certain people who go through things and they don't get that choice. That's literally just reality that they go through and they have to find ways to navigate it. So if you have the choice to do it, I mean, by all means, you should always take that choice because it gives you more relatability and it also creates vulnerability to me, it breeds empathy.
I know. I don't know if I can follow that.
You can.
I believe in you.
I mean,
I support you.
I feel like I'm giving these lame answers, but
No.
y'all got this. No, but I mean, for me, like, I think the hardest part as an extrovert, I have always, until the last few years, because I've grown up, but I've always like, it's just like, oh, I'll do it. Like, I got it. Like, or I'll speak, or let me, like, it's just, I'm eager to like get in and like give my thought or say that, like, it's so natural. And I am like very socially aware of how everyone else is feeling at all times, just from how I grew up. And so I'm like, I'm watching everyone's emotions all the time. So I'm like, okay, let me jump in and help them or do this. And when it comes to DEI, there's a lot that I just want to jump in and be like, we need to do this, we need to do this, I need to do that, I need to do that. And it's been difficult to realize that I'm trying to make sure I'm trying to say this correctly. Like, it's been difficult to not be that person, because it's something that needs to come from me, but I need to make sure that I make space for it to come from the Black women on my team, right? Like, maybe this isn't my space to get up and say, hey, this is what it's like being a Black woman or a Black male. Like, you need to realize your unconscious bias, right? But like, setting the stage to make sure that they can share their story. And it's something that, I mean, that's just like the most vulnerable. It's hard to not be like, I'm aware of this situation, I'm aware of like our differences, but I want to make sure that you know that I'm on your team, but like, how can I get involved? But also, I'm not the right person to be involved. So I actually, when I met Eric, like Eric gave a presentation at a SOACE event, and it was conference, and I'm not gonna lie, like, I went because I was like, UNT is one of my schools I recruit at, like, I wanna go meet these people. And I was sitting there, and it was just so vulnerable and real, like, hey, Black Lives Matter movement happened, and this is what our students wanted, and this is what they did, right? Where sometimes you go to those conferences and it's like, these are all the awesome things that we're doing to create a safe space, and it's like, okay, right? But it was so tangible, and just a few things that he said, like, hey, we wanna make sure that our students see people that look like them at career fairs. Never thought about that, right? Like, I would have probably just had a bunch of white people at all these career fairs. So I'm like, oh, they're my friends, like, they're in my office, like, they're gonna come. So it's made me more intentional, but being able to like work with him and go to him and say, hey, like, I know I'm not always gonna be the right person for these situations, right? Like Marshall Eagles. I know that I'm not gonna be the best person to roll up in there and give them advice, but I want to. Like, so give me the stage to like help and tell me and teach me. So that's my commitment, is just consciously like removing myself from jumping in so hard and setting the stage for others, and then just calling out when I see that we're not being inclusive, right? Like, someone at the fair said something like, hey, instead of asking if everyone can hear me, I'm just gonna assume everyone can't, so I'm gonna mic up. I would have never even thought to set the stage like that, right? So, just still learning a lot, but just being vulnerable.
Can I just?
Yeah,
I
go
want
ahead,
to
'cause our
acknowledge
show was
that.
about
Yeah,
to-
sorry,
I
I'm
was
like,
like, I want to acknowledge
You
that.
have a very artistic way of doing what you do. It's so inspiring to hear that that's something that you are currently working on. Because I feel like I was just talking to Eric, I'm like, you know why Alexis is awesome? You know what I mean?
I don't know,
Yeah.
it might not be, I'm gonna say it, but we'll see how it goes.
No,
But
like,
yeah, no,
you
just-
do this beautiful thing where you show up and like it's a clear, like, actionable
Right.
support. It's not just about the word of mouth of like, how can I help? It's like, how can I help? I'm there.
Right,
You know, and like whenever you helped coordinate, whenever we had guests come to speak with the Marshall Eagles, that took work, effort, and energy, and that was allyship.
Right.
But then when you were there, you just sat back and let the people who really needed to pour into those students speak. And I just want to acknowledge, like, if that's
Thank
something
you,
you're
'cause
working
that
on.
was so hard.
No, you're
I
right.
know.
So many things I wanted to say. I was like, oh, this is good. I got something really good. But no, it's probably, I mean, it sounds so lame to say, but it's so hard when I'm like, I've got all this advice and like, I want to help you. And like, and just being able to sit back and just listen. I think that's just, it's not easy. And it's just something that we just got to start listening to each other. And I got to do a better job too, so.
And I think when we did have that session, when you spoke up, it was coming from a place of support.
Right.
You know, it wasn't coming from a place of advice or you need to fix this, or you just was there present, the minority in the room, let's be real, the minority
sure.
in the room. And, you know, when you spoke, it came from a place of support and value and endorsement and power. And I mean, that's all we could ask for, you know what I'm saying? Just show up and then offer support. So
Right.
do want to
And
put
another,
a button
sorry,
on that.
this is another.
But Kevin, I just wanted to just acknowledge that because that was a personal interaction.
Because
Yeah.
you haven't been about
Yeah.
it's not lip service.
Yeah.
You have showed
You
up.
just showed
And so
up,
like
man.
and then like another example of allyship is when we had our interview simulation. Again, you were another minority in the room. But for you as a white woman coming and telling the students, advocate for your name. right? Like, don't let people butcher your name, and let me make sure that I'm saying your name correctly. That I'm sure, as me as a Elsita Dean, you know, I was so inspired to hear.
And I know she was
Don't
inspired.
minimize
You know,
yourself.
Seriously.
after that, she probably talked about that thing about 10 times. I was like,
but
that's important to you.
Elsita,
How often does
Put
that
respect on
happen?
my
Like, I
name.
see so many students where their name, I'm not even gonna try to pronounce it.
Yeah.
It's like, and they're like, oh, you can call me Joe. I'm like, that's not your name. Like, because you're not gonna be able to change it in 6 years. Like, you're just gonna be Joe. So, no, it's just little things that are important, and it's scary. I mean, I get scared of confrontation as a woman. I cannot even try to imagine being a woman of color from a low income, like, you know, and I'm just trying to help as much as I can, but I still will never understand. So the least I can do is just try to listen. And I think that's where a lot of people in corporate America or just in society today, it's so, you're so scared to say the wrong thing or to not, I don't know, that you just don't do it, right? And so that's, I think, coming from like my level of privilege. I see that, and now I see that more clearly, like with people I know, it's like they're so scared to mess it up. It's just easier to be ignorant. And so you have to really be, you know, understanding with that, but also cancel it, you know, stop
And
it.
something you said was really profound. Like, and sorry, Kevin, I feel like
That's
we
all
covered
right,
it.
you know.
so sorry. But something you said was really profound. It was the piece about not understanding. Like, and I think that understanding versus knowing are two different things. Right. Your knowledge is infinite. You can gain as much knowledge in a certain subject matter as is available to you and as that you want, right? But your understanding of said subject matter will always be limited if you don't own that identity, right? So it's like I can read every book known to man. I can go to every lecture, every conference, and I will never know what it's like to be Asian, right? And I think that that's important to distinguish between the two. And I'm so glad you said that. And it's a difficult thing to do and say because it doesn't sound great, right? To be like, well, I don't understand you, and that's not what you're necessarily saying per se. You're just saying like, because I can't walk in your shoes, because I don't know what it's like to have that type of discrimination, like. I can't understand fully, right? But I can have knowledge. I can share with you things I've read. I can share with you things that are going on in the conference world or in the DEI world, right? I can share those things with you, and that might be your part. But I think that it is so important to distinguish, to be like, yeah, I don't. And sometimes, as a person of color and as a person who is sometimes in marginalized groups and sometimes not in marginalized groups, it's important to be able to be able to walk that line, to be able to know and say like, I'm here, but I'm not gonna try to co-opt you, right?
Yeah.
Kevin.
Thank you.
It's your turn.
Wonderful thought leader. Yeah, great answers. I think for me, my commitment is to lead with care. I think in this world, in this society, there's a lot of times where we encounter a lot of hate. We encounter a lot of problems. We encounter a lot of discrimination, a lot of just pain. And sometimes people just need that level of care, that someone they talk to, a stranger, or someone who's a mentor, or someone who is in the workplace as a coworker, or someone who's a supervisor, at least cares about their well-being and how to engage with that and entering in that conversation as soon as possible and say like, hey, I know there's a lot going on in the world. How can I help you? How can I be there for you? How can I share this space with you or be in this space with you so that you can feel protected or supported or cared for, right? And I want to do that for every single person I meet, every institution I go to, every student I want to like talk to or have a conversation with, because there's a level of fear in each person, I think, about the world, about their life, about finances, about their relationships, and they just need a little bit more love and energy from people. And I think I can offer that, and I want to offer that, and I want to continue to offer that, especially in the work that I do here, working with folks in their career development, even in this space, having a conversation with all of you and talking about what DEI means to us and how it impacts us every day. These are the little things I think help shape community and a community of care. And if we continue to move forward and towards that direction or goal, I think it'll be better. I don't see a negative to caring for others and providing love for others and really having that space for others. So that's my commitment. I think that's something we all do. I've heard all of this from all of you, and it's just something that I think is really fulfilling for me.
You need the brand community of care. That's good.
Yeah.
It's a good
Yeah,
branding
trademark.
opportunity.
He just got that calm voice, don't he?
You know,
Like,
it's
it's so
like-
soothing, and I'm like, man, I care
Yeah,
too.
all this-
I'm a Care Bear. You know?
I do. So this sparks a thought for me, and I just want to throw it out there, see where it goes. Because caring is important. And you mentioned this too, how diversity can feel so overwhelming and heavy. And also when you're in the thick of it, it can be very fatiguing. You know what I mean? To be sometimes the only person in your office that feels like, you know what I mean, that you're actually working towards. So like, how do you manage that fatigue? What kind of encouragement would you give to people who are either in the work or just starting the work where it doesn't feel overwhelming of like, how can I change the world, right? But like, what would you say?
I'd say, I get it. I'm here with you. It's a tough world. It's a tough and challenging world where we're going to be challenged every moment of our day, whether it be learning new perspectives, learning new identities, learning new cultures, and everything. And it's tough to manage all of that, and it's not easy. It's not easy at all. And I don't expect everyone to perfect that or master that or just be in a space where they understand everything. And it's okay to say you don't understand everything. And I think with that level of mindset, that'll help you grow. That'll help you figure out that, hey, I don't understand everything, but I can try. And I can try to find other folks that are in the same space as me. So, I mean, although I have done professional work in DEI related stuff, and I'm talking with all of you, and you have really intelligent minds, that doesn't mean I'm a full-on expert where I mastered everything, I know everyone, I know all theories, I know all ways of practicing efficiently. No, that's not true. And even as I go forward in my life, as I age more, I don't think I'll ever reach a space where I'm a master of everything. And that's okay. But as long as you're reaching towards, like Kevin said, being a lifelong learner and always engaging in things that are different and challenging, then I think that's okay. And that's, as long as you put that effort towards it, I think you'll be in a better place. I think we all will be in a better place. And it's just something I think we should try to strive for. So, yeah.
I'm gonna let you finish this out because I know you're gonna finish it out good. So I'll put in my 2 cents. No, it's extremely fatiguing. I think when everything really started with the Black Lives Matter movement a couple years ago, it was exhausting and awful and just sad, right? Like, it's as much as you are doing the work and you're wanting to help and you're diving in and you're constantly having Facebook arguments, like whatever that looks like for you. It was disheartening, but I felt like at that time I could always be like, but it's gonna get better, and I'm your ally, like I'm here for you. Like, I had hope, but it wasn't really affecting me, right? So it's easy for me to say. I think the most fatigue I felt was when Roe v. Wade got overturned, and it just was like, and we don't have much time, but I'm just like, that for me was like 4 days of just defeat of like, I can't get out of bed. What is this world I'm living in? Like now I'm less of a person as looked at by someone else. So it's just like, I think that was my realest moment of, yes, I've been othered as a female or I've been an ally, but like that was my moment of like, man, it's me now. So now I'm like really feeling how my partners have been feeling. And so I don't know the answer yet. I'd say what's working for me is just trying to find ways to be a part of, I don't know how to fix it, but sharing things that I know people will understand, right? So I'll find things on Instagram that are like quick graphics that I can just post to my story. And that to me feels like a win for the day, right? Like I'm educating people in a way that they can understand, right? It's not religious, it's just like, this is this. So I would say just find something that you can do that gets one day at a time, like one little thing when you're getting fatigued, and realize like the world doesn't change overnight, but small actions, right? Just like microaggressions will tear down someone.
Yes.
Small actions of like kindness will build someone up, and you never know like how you're affecting other people. So at the end of the day, when you're feeling like, why is it all on me to fix everything? Like this is exhausting. Why does no one else care? Maybe it is all on you, but like you got to do it. Like we got to do it. Like there's a reason why you're passionate about this or you care about this, right? Like no one else is as passionate about it in the same way that you are and for why you are. So like bring that to the table, give yourself space to feel fatigued and feel upset, right? Like acknowledge other people are feeling that way, but still like you can't give up. Like we got to keep showing up. It's the only way it's going to get better because someone else showed up for us, right? And so we got to show up for the future.
Nice.
That's good.
And I'll be running for president. I'm just kidding. 2020.
This message is paid for. I think so much of DEI work is often looked at on a polarized spectrum. And what do I mean by that is we look at things and we say, well, everybody cares about this and they're doing great and things are going great and you know we're on the pathway to prosperity. Other end of the spectrum, nobody else cares about this. I feel like I'm the only person that's pulling the weight, that's doing the work, right? When in all actuality, your reality is somewhere in the middle, right? There are going to be times when, depending on the issue, depending on the space, depending on the people that are in and out of the space, where you are going to have more buy-in, and there are going to be people who actually genuinely want to invest in the work and do the work. There are going to be other times where you do feel like I'm by myself in this, and there isn't an appetite for that to happen, right? And you see that oftentimes when you have to deal with those things that aren't leading off the news, right? I tell people all the time, if you're gonna do DEI work, it's easy to do DEI work when there's a major national event going on. It's hard to do DEI work when you got to tell your coworker during lunch that thing that they said was inappropriate. But in all actuality, again, that's when a lot of the work is done, right? Because doing that, being able to educate folks and being able to help people and being able to still do meaningful work in those periods of time make the more difficult, higher scale, large scale things easier to navigate, because then that person has a bigger appetite for it because they're like, oh, I should care about this. I should do this thing. We do that with a lot of things in life. We look at things and we put them in a good or bad, right? And what happens is that we get uncomfortable in the middle, right? When things aren't necessarily perfect and when things aren't necessarily terrible, we're like, what should I be doing in this space? Like, what should be happening? Like, there isn't something leading off the news. There isn't a unifying issue for us to get around. What should I be doing in that space? I'm so glad that you mentioned Roe v. Wade because a lot of times we don't think of those types of things as DEI issues, and they are. Right? We look at DEI and oftentimes we reduce it to just race and things we can see and we can touch. But that is a major DEI issue on a number of different levels, whether it be dealing with women's rights or even the intersection that happens with transgender rights and things like that. and even access to healthcare and mortality rates and Black women. Like there's so many different ways you can go with it that it's a big issue. But I think that in times like this where it's all hands on deck and we have a unifying issue to get around, then the energy is there. You feel it, right? And you're like, I know that there's gonna be somebody else in the room that agrees with me. It's in those spaces where there's an issue that happens or a cause that's going on that maybe not everybody's educated on, right? Maybe not everybody knows that this is something they should be concerned about. Maybe not everybody knows the extent of the damage that this thing is potentially doing, that it gets heavy and it gets difficult to do. Right? In these moments now, this is where we find our energy. Where it's like, okay, we're all unified. You know, we're getting ready to go into midterms. When it's a presidential election, we're all on the same page. Like, we either are for or we're against. We're all feeling good about that. It's those spaces, which is why, I don't know for anybody else on the panel, but typically when you get a few months beyond a major event happening, you have almost this low. It's almost like a depressive feeling, where it's like we were so high and we all had high hopes for doing things and changing things and being reformers in this way, and now those things aren't happening, and I still feel the heaviness that comes with that thing still going on and still existing. And I feel like now I have to deal with that. The thing I would challenge in saying as well is understanding that all because a person doesn't outwardly display a sense of care doesn't mean they don't internally feel that same heaviness that you feel, right? And I think that we got to be careful as folks who do DEI work not to be exclusive in our thought towards people who don't express things the way we express things, right? There are some people who feel just as mad, just as upset about things as you, but they might not have the capacity or the space to do it. There are people who might feel the same way about an issue that's going on that might not be their identity or might not be something that they necessarily understand or relate to specifically, that can't necessarily show it the same way you show it, because if they did, guess what? You'd be upset with them for trying to claim your issue. So it's like, it's important for us to check ourselves sometimes as folks who do DEI work to not be counterproductive to the message that we care so much about and be exclusive.
Man, that really challenged my,
I know, I was like, well,
my approach, because you get in this energy there, you trying to make change and you want things to happen and you have these expectations and it's like, you have to, I like what you said, you just have to check yourself, because people might have those emotions, they just don't know how to communicate that. And that really hit home for me, because I do have to check, especially being in a role where I'm looked upon as a person to push this DUI. It's like I have to be able to step back and really be understanding and think about the holistic picture. On the panel, we went to an employee panel. It was a employer that's made a comment that really, like, I'm really trying to figure out the definition of it. She said, some organizations show up as diversity friendly, and then some organizations show up as, or moving from diversity friendly organization to diversity ready. Yeah. What does a diversity ready organization look like? That's what I'm trying to process right now, because that's where I hope that's my expectation, my energy. I'm like, I want to get to that diversity ready, but I don't know what that look like. So if y'all got any insight on what that look like, or just any thoughts on it, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Honestly, I hate that I'm going to say this, but I don't know what that looks like. I mean, I feel like I work for a company that's really trying hard to diversify itself and actively, intentionally bring in partners that are the best people to be in the room or to be setting the stage to be ready, especially on campus, right? But it's a journey. I mean, I think sometimes I'm guilty of this a lot of the time, is like, it's black or white. Like, I go right there, like, we're either all in or we're not. Yeah. But coming from a corporation I've been in for 5.5 years, it is so much deeper than that, because we're talking, okay, so what, do we just fire everyone? And it's tenure, it's time, it's changing mindsets, it's this has always worked this way, why do we now have to do it this way? I talked about this in Marshall Eagles. For the first time I've had, after Marshall Eagles, I was talking with some partners. And it was the first time where I'm like, I was jacked. Like, I was like, yes, like, we need to make sure that when you walk into the room, you're not the only person in the room that looks like you, you know? And they were like, that's awesome. Gave me the feedback too of like, sometimes the bigger of an issue we make it, the less people want to deal with it. So then I get intentionally left out of the room because it's like, now it's like a weird vibe of, oh my gosh, if I mess up, now I'm back to that feeling scared. Like, I don't want to say the wrong thing. I don't want to make myself vulnerable. So let's just not even have the situation happen. So I think there's just like, it's a lot of movement. I mean, 2 years was 2 years since this really kicked off, right? Of like, exposure. Like, what are you doing? What are you doing? You know? So I think it's a journey. I hope that, I mean, I know it's in my career, but just in general, like, I hope that people can see the journey and see the intentionality that companies are doing, but you can't, it's just not a one size fits all. Like, it's going to take time. But I really feel like 2020, same with like, hey, we don't have to do every interview in person. There's a thing called Skype. It's really cool. We can make it happen in an hour or like Teams or whatever, Zoom. It's just like, we can make that work. We can FaceTime. Like, that's a real thing. Before it was everything's in person. I think with the same with DEI, it's like, all right, Gen Z put a spotlight on corporate America. And they're like, what are you doing? So we have moved really fast, but to get ready, I don't know. I would love to hear what y'all have to say because I don't know what ready looks like. I mean, we're doing unconscious bias training. We're doing all these things, but if you're a continuous learner, are you ever ready? I don't know. So, but I loved that comment at the panel too, because it really was. And the follow-up question too was, how do we know if companies are just saying that they're open to diversity or if they really are? I don't know. Is it necessarily like, if they're saying they are, just make them prove it, and then, but like, just take the win? Like, you know, like if we're pushing women in leadership right now at my company, that's a win for me. Like, even for whatever reason it is, I'm going to take the platform and try to build people up. So deep down, maybe morally sometimes, I'm like, is this the right thing? Who's doing it? You know, but you can't let yourself get there when you're trying to make progress. Like, sometimes you just got to take the wins as it comes. So yeah, I'd really be open to hearing what y'all have to say, because we're still trying to get there.
That's valid. That's a hard question because it can look very different in different organizations, whether it be higher education or a private sector business, right? And I think being diversity ready or even inclusive ready or equitable is to be agile. It's just really going towards being adaptable, being flexible, and lifelong learning, and trying to make opportunities to just work with the flow. Because I know some structures of organizations can be very rigid, and the past is the past, and it's like, oh, we've done it this way and we'll continue to do it this way. But I don't think that's the mindset that folks need to be ready for diversity, equity, or inclusion, because it's not fast enough. I would even challenge higher education to say they're not fast enough in being agile in this approach and being engaging with staff or being engaging with students in that manner. And all of it comes down to resources as well. You know, if it takes a lot of resources to shift and change and grow. And are we willing to put in those resources to do that? Because it's a big feat, and it's going to require a lot of people, and it's also going to require just an environment and climate change. And are we ready? It's just, is the organization really willing to put those resources into making that change? Because if the resources aren't going in, then might as well just say like, oh, hey, I would love to do this. I just can't help you with anything else. But say like, hey, good job. We're going the right direction. But if they are willing to put in, because we're in a capitalist world, we revolve around funds, we revolve around resources. That's just the reality of it. And if the talk is not being backed up with the walk of providing those resources, then it's not going to happen. I don't think they're going to be ready. So it's really about their intentionality and their direction, their mission. Are they changing their mission, their vision, their values to line up with being diversity ready? And if we can answer those questions from the top down, then we can figure it out, because it does start from the top. Is that top person willing to talk with all their leadership and other folks to be on the same page and do this? So
I think some of it too is when you look at the word ready and you just dissect that word, to me, the parallel to that word is preparation. When you're prepared for something, that means you expect the things that come with the thing you're prepared for, right? For all of us here, at some point in time, we all strive to be career ready. That's the buzzword in our industries, right? We want folks that are career ready, or we're trying to teach people how to be career ready. At our points and times in our lives, at no point do we ever get to career readiness and say, I am now career ready, right? You didn't recognize that or really know. It's just you got to a point to where you were prepared to do the things that you set out to do. And with companies, institutions, universities, whatever it may be, we have to stop with the arrogance that comes with declaring yourself as something that you have not yet earned, right? If you get to the point to which you are prepared for the plight that comes with doing DEI work, if you get to the point to where you're prepared to deal with people who look different than your typical employee or your typical student, then that will happen naturally and organically, and you should not declare that as a thing. But too often what's happening is that we're like, well, I hired, some black people at my company, and we are now diverse. And it's like, well, you're diverse, and maybe you added another race in there, but there's a lot of other races that are still there. You hadn't done anything with income equality, hadn't done anything with a lot of the other things that come with that, but you've declared yourself as something that you have not yet fully earned yet, and because of that, you've really kind of slighted the work that you actually are setting out to do, right? So I think that when we get to the point in time where we understand, you can't yourself declare something that isn't fully in existence yet, then we pull back our arrogance and we approach things with humility. I personally think that it is impossible to approach diversity, equity, and inclusion from an arrogant mindset. Like, you can't do it, right? You have to approach from a humble mindset of understanding, no, I don't know everything. And readiness is not perfection, right? Readiness doesn't mean you're gonna do everything right. Readiness doesn't mean that you're gonna, be the best at all times. Like, readiness just means that, hey, when a police brutality incident happens, then my company is prepared to have the language and the support necessary for our employees and our customers. When Roe v. Wade happens, we understand that our employees, whether they be female employees, male employees, transgender, non-binary, non-identifying, whatever it may be, we understand that we're going to have to address that. We might not have it figured out yet what that looks like, but we're prepared to do something, and that is in existence. It's in works. To me, that's what preparation looks like. When I'm preparing for a test, or I'm preparing for an event, I'm preparing for a speaking engagement, that's a ongoing thing. That's not a thing that's final. That's something that I'm consistently doing, and I'm constantly tweaking things, and depending on the information that's presented to me, it changes, right? No different from a company being diversity or inclusion or equity ready. You should be changing, but there should be an appetite for change.
I would touch on that and say, to me, DEI it's a journey that never ends.
Yeah.
Like, we're always finding out new science,
Yes.
like literal science about our brains and how we interact with each other. Social science is always evolving. Like, it's never gonna end. You always have to be looking to be ready, quote unquote. And look, as an employee, like, I can make diversity happen overnight. Like, you want me to make sure I got 50% male, 50% female, 30-30, like, I can make sure that everyone is great, but those mindsets are still there. Like, the equity mindset has to be, I'll tell you right now, like, you can walk into one of, I don't know, any business right now, and they would probably tell you, like, oh yeah, we're equal. Yeah. Like, we let everyone come in and, like, whatever, but hey, like, start time's at 7, ends at 4, like, but hey, we give everyone the opportunity to have that, it's like, okay, well, to the single dad of 3 kids that daycare isn't open until 7:30, you think he could come in at 8 to 5? Like, y'all are open till, it's like, no, that's just how we've always done it. It's like, why have we always done it that way, right? So I think that mindset is something that's always got to be rolling, but it's hard to put a time on it,
That's real good.
Wow. Thank
Yeah, thank
y'all
you.
so
Thank you.
I just, can I recap for a second? All the beautiful things that I heard today. Yes. First of all, the importance of DEI. What I took away from this is taking a person and changing it from being othered, seen as othered, to just being seen. Like, you don't want to be the Jewish person. You don't want to be the member of the LGBTQ community. You don't want to be just labeled as seen as othered. You just want to be seen as your whole self, right? So that's the importance of D&I work. When it comes to the commitment, what I heard from all of you is leveraging your privilege, acknowledging that you do have privilege, and then using your seats of power to advocate for someone who maybe don't. And like, I love how you said, pushing it, someone advocated for me to be here. Yeah. How can I make sure I'm advocating for someone else to be here that maybe wouldn't have been if I didn't speak up? When it comes to just managing the fatigue, what I heard is basically just doing what you can do. Don't bite off more than you can chew. Just acknowledge that you're doing what you can do, and any little bit counts. Again, y'all was all saying really great things. Is just like you can break somebody down with microaggressions, you can also build somebody up with just letting them be heard and seen for who they are. And what I'm hearing when it comes to being a diverse friendly to a diverse ready is fostering a culture from the top down that is growth oriented, service oriented, putting yourself and acknowledging you're not going to have all of the answers, but checking your intentions, doing the internal work of why am I doing this? Is this a fad? Am I just doing this based on the news because somebody told me I got to do this and it's going to make us more profitable? Or am I doing this because I actually want people to be seen and acknowledged and included in the space where they belong, right? And then the action part, right? Putting your money where your mouth is. Are you offering paternity leave alongside maternity leave, right? Are you finding ways to narrow that salary gap between men and women, right? Like, how are you making sure that you're actionably, but doing it from a good, intentional place, right? To leave long-lasting impact. That's what I'm hearing. So thank y'all for that rich conversation. We couldn't have done it without you.
And my final thoughts, and we wrap it up first. Thank you guys for, just being a part of this and offering your knowledge and experience and vulnerability to help us all grow, because I feel like this conversation challenged my thinking, and that's a part of being ready. Being able to be challenged and say, okay, I accept that. Now how can I apply that to my life so I can make contributions to the world around me? But just to end it off, the reason why we were very intentional about picking this panel, because it goes back to diversity ready, and I was like, what does that mean? It's because y'all live by action. Y'all live by action. Kevin, you came to us on the committee and was saying, how can I serve? How can I be a part of that? Alexis, you came up to the SOAS and it was like, I heard what you said. How can I be a part of that? And Kev, even at the summer emerging, you came up. You came up and said, man, I want to be a part of that. This is what I can offer. And I think diversity ready, that's what it is. Showing up and saying, how can I be a part of this? And offering your skills, your strengths, your vulnerability, your understanding, your mistakes, your issues, and putting it out there and saying, okay, this is me. I'm willing to correct it so I can show that I care and I'm here to support. So we can end off with that. Thank you guys. I really appreciate you. You challenged us, and we are diverse.
We are diverse. Yes.